So I wanted to do something a little bit different in this video. I wanted to go over what is wokeness? Because I've been asked this question a number of times and there really isn't a concrete definition. I've had people who are triggered by some of the things that I've said online that have disingenuously tried to come up with this rebuttal to my arguments, asking, well, what even is wokeness? Thinking that that's some sort of gotcha. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not. I can define what wokeness is. And I think that my definition is pretty spot on. And I use wokeness in this application. So we're going to go over that. I'm going to explain to you what wokeness is and how I choose to define it. And I think that my definition is pretty damn good. Now let's start here. I will walk you through this. Essentially, wokeness is a mind virus caused by overwhelming weak-minded idiots with constant negative news and other content designed to keep a person angry because the social media algorithms learned that anger is what keeps people's attention and got them to share said content. Full stop. So, what does this mean? Well, you're scrolling through Twitter, you're scrolling through Facebook. What gets you to stop and look at something? Well, let's say a police brutality video. You see the injustice, you see a cop acting in a certain way. Well, you watch that, you share that. Well, then you get a whole bunch of other police brutality videos, and suddenly, this is a huge issue. Now, I'm going to use this as an example, but by no means is this the only example of this. This is just the one that I'm going to use. Now, if you asked one of these people, how many black people, unarmed, do you think are killed by police in America in a given year? Their answer is probably going to be in the thousands. They're probably going to say unarmed black people are killed at an absolutely astonishing rate. It's probably like 30 to 40%. It's unbelievable. This is a huge issue. Huge issue. This is a major problem. We need to protest. We need to burn down cities. We need to burn down buildings. We can even kill people in our righteous rage because they've been fed these videos over and over and over. And so they're thinking this is a huge problem. Let's take a look. 1,053 people have been shot and killed by police in the last 12 months. That's not black people. That's everyone. Now, you're saying 1,000 people, that's a lot. No, granted, that is a lot. But let's go down to the bottom here, and let's take a look based on race. I've already gone ahead and clicked it. By race, unarmed. 2% of victims. 2%. That's 157 people who were black, who were unarmed, and killed by the police. Now, in some of these, you see that it was mental illness related. They make notes of this. Fleeing by foot. Just because you're unarmed doesn't mean that you are some innocent person who didn't do nothing. It simply means that you were unarmed. This basically includes people who get into fights with cops, who get into punching matches with cops, mental illness related fleeing by foot. My point here is that the number is 2%. And keep in mind, this is for the last 12 months. Now, why am I showing you this? Because the algorithm pumps this shit to you all the time. They pump this shit over and over and over so that you, as somebody who feels like, wow, this is a huge issue. Do you want to know what the crime stats are for Chicago? I'll show you. This is this is up to date. So this is April 16. It's a couple days old. 2023. Okay. Murder. 2023. 146. The year is not even over. So year to date, there have been 146 murders in Chicago. By the end of the year, I imagine it's probably going to be a whole hell of a lot higher. So you would think that, okay, well then this is the more pressing issue. This is the thing that needs to be addressed. No. Because they think this is the bigger issue. They think the 2% of victims, which, by the way, it's not 2% of innocent victims, it's black people who are unarmed. The percentage of them that are shot by cops in the last 12 months, and this is coming from the Washington Post. This is not like Fox News or something like that. No, this is the Washington Post, and they have an obvious bias. They have an obvious bias. So they're not doing this because they want to downplay it. This is just the facts. So getting back to this, that is why wokeness is such an issue, is because you're being fed all of this sort of information to make you angry. That was one issue that I disproved in a couple minutes. People who are impressionable to this stuff are being fed this stuff all day, every day, by this algorithm to make them angry. So here we continue. The result is that it created a generation of short attention span, brain-rotted zombies who are essentially pre-programmed with an arsenal of nonsensical, terrible, and extremely malformed ideas and opinions, all jammed together with no logical consistency. Give me a goddamn medal, because that is exactly what wokeness is. It is the worldview of a person that has become susceptible and indoctrinated to this cult. It's why you will hear people say things that are so observably not true, and it irritates regular people, and they can't understand why. How on earth could you possibly have come to this conclusion? Well, it's because there are enough people that have succumbed to this, that they've all gone in on it, and this is what we're having to deal with. Additionally, due to the hostile, violent, and often aggressive nature of the content, the propensity of the woke towards blind hatred and violence is elevated to a level that will shock the average everyday person. Tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me that you're not watching a video and some person is like, yeah, I disagree with transgenderism. And some tranny who looks the ugliest human being you've ever seen on earth, obviously a guy in a wig, just gross, doesn't even take the time to have a reasonable conversation. They'll just flip a table over, they'll use violence, they'll punch them, they'll threaten them, they'll grab their stuff, they'll do this huge display because they think that the problem is so huge and that the people advocating this are so evil that it justifies their blind hatred, their violence, and their rage. It is a mental illness that allows people to do this because they are being fed bullshit by an algorithm, by a computer, and it's a huge problem. There is also the de-evolution into a state of pure degeneracy and a gravitation towards the most depraved, disgusting, and horrific sexual content. Example, the defense of pedophiles, transgenders, etc. When it comes to transgenders, it isn't that being a transgender in itself is degenerate, because you have people like Blair White that aren't out there advocating for, wearing a leather mask and a dog leash in front of kids, but it's all sort of the same cult. Blair White isn't in the cult. You can be transgender and not part of this, but if you are woke, and a lot of people are, within this online space, this is ultimately what it leads to. You have a definition here. This is, for all intents and purposes, the Ten Commandments. This explains in detail who these people are. It explains the type of content they produce. It explains why they look at something like Florida. The quote-unquote don't say gay bill has nothing to do with being gay. Has nowhere in it the word gay. It basically says kindergarten through third grade, you cannot have sexually explicit material and curriculum in the classroom. The teacher could have a picture of their LGBT partner. They could one-on-one in a discussion say, yeah, you know what, I got married to a woman. Had nothing to do with not saying gay, but that was the narrative because that was the information pumped out there because the algorithm favors this. Tim Pool mentioned something called ElsaGate, which I think is fascinating and plays into this. Wokeness is basically an overwhelming of algorithmic manipulations to keep people's attention, and it has turned what would otherwise be fully sentient human beings into angry, ignorant, illogical, demented, deranged, violent drones that cannot articulate a single opinion because they don't have a single opinion. There is no principle to this. There is no consistency to this. It is say whatever you have to say in the moment because that is what the algorithm tells us to say. What the cult says in the moment, the algorithm promotes, and the mob goes along with it. Doesn't matter anything else. Doesn't matter how logically inconsistent it is. There should be no one on the left who is advocating for transgenders in women's sports. Because that is a direct attack on women's rights. Women's rights to compete in their own sport. There should be no one on the left advocating for transgenders in women's bathrooms. The only reason that that is an issue is because the algorithm has pushed this issue, and because of the anger, the fervor, the ferocity, and the vitriol, they don't care what the actual thing is. And it's only individuals who stumble into the right answer and have to defend themselves from this mob. It's only then that they come to realize how ridiculous it is. Like Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks. Very recently, poor little Anna, she came out and said, I don't want you to call me a birthing person. I'm a woman. Now that is a sane, normal, reasonable thing to say. I don't want you to insult my gender by basically removing it completely. I'm a woman. And what happened? They came after her like she was the new Donald Trump. She is an extremely far left, extremely stupid person, just as dumb as all of them, just as toxic as all of them, just as illogical as all of them. She hits every check mark, but she has said something that they don't like, and because their brains are not capable of dealing with that sort of issue, they don't know how to handle it. They reacted with pure revulsion, anger, rage, threats, intimidation, and blind, seething rage towards somebody who up till yesterday was one of their own. And now she's right-wing, and now she's MAGA, and now she's conservative. And all it takes is one deviation, and these pre-programmed bots will turn on you and attack you as though you've always been that way, because we're not dealing with well-adjusted, mentally well human beings. We're dealing with degenerate, creepy, gross, simple-minded people. And not like, oh, that person's simple. No, I mean, these people are genuinely weak-minded. They don't have the ability to understand the context of situations, which is why I brought up the police shooting thing. Because they look at this and they go, well, this issue is so big and so systemic and so huge. In the last 12 months, 157 black people have been shot who were unarmed. 2% of the total of people. But if you listen to the media, if you listen to the left, if you listen to the algorithm, that can't possibly be true. Now, let me, for a second, go to white. White and unarmed. 197 victims over the last 12 months. We're not dealing with an epidemic of unarmed people being shot by the police. That's not what we're dealing with here. But that's what they want you to believe. So let's take a look at armed and black, 22%, 43%. So the problem as they have outlined it is not true. The problem as they have outlined it is not true. The way that they have presented it is not true. However, they believe it with all fervor because the algorithm told them so. They have been fed this bullshit so much over and over that it's basically just, you look at their bios. You look at their bios. If I could, I'm not going to go in and shame anyone individually, but they've got all the same pictures, all the same bios, all the same hashtags, all the same, trans lives matter, all that stuff. All of it is completely the same because there's not an original bone in any of their bodies. They are pre-programmed. They are all the same. They have the same terrible ideas. They have the same demented, warped, hateful, toxic view of the world. They are as wrong today as they were 10 years ago. And unless we understand this issue, understand what wokeness is, we're going to repeat the same mistakes. We're going to go through the same things over and over. And I would very much like to prevent that from happening. So that's my definition of wokeness. I think it's a pretty damn good one. I think it's pretty to the point. If you want to use this, if you want to share this, by all means, I think it's pretty damn accurate. If you haven't yet, come join me on Rumble. It is an alternative to YouTube. It is free. We are up to 28 followers, baby. 2 away from 30. This number was 6 a couple of days ago. So we're seeing growth. We're jumping up. I still love this thumbnail I made. Absolutely perfection. Anyway, thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I genuinely appreciate it. Share this video with people who don't know what wokeness is. And who knows, maybe you can educate somebody. Anyway, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.